Everyone assumes the real threat to a fighter jet is another fighter jet, a missile, a radar lock, a dogfight. That logic still holds in the air. That is what these aircraft were built for. So when military planners, air defense officials, and defense companies started pouring money into counter-drone systems, interceptor drones, and base defense, the signal was hard to miss. Something had changed, not in theory, in the way advanced air power now has to survive. The clearest warning came in 2025. Ukraine reportedly hid small drones inside wooden sheds mounted on trucks, moved them deep inside Russia, and launched them near strategic air bases. Not near the front, not against some disposable target, against aircraft and infrastructure that distance was supposed to protect. That is the detail that changes the whole picture. Because if a high-value aircraft can be threatened without the attacker needing a bomber, a stealth jet, or even long drone range, then the old rulebook starts to break. The fighter is no longer the whole target. The runway matters. The fuel matters. The radar matters. The maintenance crews matter. The parked aircraft matter. So the real question is no longer whether a cheap drone can outfight an advanced jet. It obviously cannot. The real question is whether cheap drones can make the entire fighter system too exposed, too expensive, and too slow to operate the way it was designed to. And if that is true, this is not really a drone story. It is a story about why some of the most advanced aircraft ever built may be entering a threat environment they were never designed for. For a long time, the logic behind modern air power looked solid. If you wanted to threaten a high-end fighter force, you needed something serious. Another fighter, a long-range missile, a dense air defense network, maybe a stealth bomber if you were trying to hit aircraft on the ground. That assumption shaped everything. It shaped where air bases were built, how aircraft were parked, how fuel was stored, how commanders thought about distance. The deeper the base sat behind the front, the safer it was supposed to be, not invulnerable, just far enough away that attacking it meant using expensive, limited assets. And that made sense. A fighter jet is not easy to replace. Neither is a tanker, neither is a hardened radar site, or a runway built to handle constant sortie generation. So advanced air forces built systems around the idea that high-value aviation assets would mostly be threatened by other high-end systems. That is, the part drone warfare is starting to tear apart, because cheap drones do not have to be the fighter in the air to create a strategic problem. They do not even have to travel the full distance in the way a cruise missile or strike aircraft does. They can be transported, hidden, launched locally, mixed with decoys, sent toward the base instead of the jet. That changes the geometry of the threat. Distance still matters. Air defenses still matter. But they do not protect in quite the same way once the attacker no longer has to solve the whole problem with range alone. That is why the 2025 truck-launched drone attack mattered so much. Not only because of what it may have damaged, but because of what it revealed. A strategic airbase can now be pressured by a threat that looks nothing like the kind of strike package these bases were built to survive. And once it becomes real, the problem spreads fast. Now every exposed aircraft parking area matters. Every fuel farm matters. Every maintenance zone matters. Every radar site matters. Suddenly the question is not just how well a fighter performs after takeoff. It is how much of the system around it can survive before takeoff ever happens. And that is a much more uncomfortable kind of vulnerability. This is where the drone story gets more dangerous than it first looks. Most people still think in very simple terms. A drone gets through, that is failure. A drone gets shot down, that is success. That would be reassuring if it were true. It is not, because a cheap drone can fail physically and still succeed strategically. It can be intercepted and still force a radar to light up. It can be destroyed and still make a defender spend an expensive missile. It can miss the target and still delay operations, stretch air defense crews, and force commanders to respond as if something worse might be coming behind it. That is exactly why Russia's long-range drone campaign against Ukraine mattered so much. The point was not only to destroy what the drones hit, the point was to keep pressure on the system. Cities had to react. Air defenses had to react. Electronic warfare units had to react. Missile stocks had to be used carefully. Crews had to stay alert night after night, because even a low-cost threat becomes exhausting when it keeps returning. And that is the part high-end air power was not built around. A fighter squadron is designed to generate combat power. It is not designed to live inside a constant economy of force reactions, where cheap drones keep asking the same question over and over. Are you going to reveal the radar? Are you going to spend the interceptor? Are you going to move the aircraft? Are you going to shut something down just in case? That pressure adds up. A runway does not have to be destroyed to cause disruption. A fuel area does not have to explode to become a concern. A base does not have to lose aircraft to become less efficient. If crews are forced to keep repositioning, if sensors have to keep cycling on and off, if commanders have to treat every small incoming threat as potentially meaningful, then the attacker's already shaping behavior. This is why the cost question matters so much. Not because cheap drones are more sophisticated than advanced fighters. Usually they are not. The problem is that they can create expensive reactions. And once that starts happening at scale, the defender faces a losing kind of math. Not losing because every drone gets through. Losing because every response costs more attention, more coordination, and often more money than the threat itself. That changes what success even means. Now success is not only shooting things down, it is surviving the pressure without burning through the very system you are trying to protect. And once that becomes a problem, the fighter jet is no longer standing alone. It is tied to a much larger machine that has to absorb the same pressure without cracking. Up to this point, you can still tell yourself the answer is mostly technical. Build better defenses, add more interceptors, put more sensors around the base. That is the natural instinct. But that only works if the fighter is the thing you are really defending. It is not by itself. A fighter jet only looks like a single weapon from a distance. In reality, it sits inside a much larger chain of support. The aircraft is a visible part, but behind it sits the runway, the fuel, the radar coverage, the weapon storage, the maintenance crews, the spare parts, the command links, the ground equipment, the tanker support, and the parking areas that keep the whole system moving. Remove enough of that, and the fighter does not need to be shot down to become strategically less useful. It simply stops mattering when it is needed most. That is the shift drone warfare is exposing. The old model of Airpower was built around the idea that high-value aircraft would mostly face other high-end threats. Enemy fighters, advanced missiles, dense air defenses, serious threats, expensive threats, but also limited threats. Cheap drones change that by pressing on the system from a different angle. Sometimes they go after the aircraft, but just as often they threaten the runway, the fuel, the radar, the maintenance area, or the daily rhythm of the base itself. And that rhythm matters more than most people realize. Modern airpower runs on tempo. Aircraft launch, recover, refuel, rearm, get checked, get repaired, and launch again. Disturb that cycle at the wrong moment, and the whole machine starts slipping. The damage does not always look dramatic either. Aircraft get moved, sorties get delayed, crews stay exposed longer, fueling becomes more cautious, maintenance windows shrink, radar use becomes more selective. Commanders start protecting assets instead of using them as freely as they want. That is real pressure, even when nothing explodes on camera. This is also why the truck-launched attack mattered beyond the immediate damage claims. What it really showed was that distance no longer solves the whole problem. A defender may still control the skies over front and still face danger deep in the rear if the attacker can move cheap systems close enough to launch locally. That should make any air force uncomfortable, because once the support chain becomes targetable, every expensive aircraft inherits the fragility of everything around it. The fighter may be advanced. The system around it may still be vulnerable to constant low-cost harassment. And that is where the cost curve starts to bite harder. Now the defender is not only protecting jets, it is protecting all the conditions that make those jets useful, which means more guards, more sensors, more shelters, more dispersal, more redundancy, more repair capacity, and more spending just to preserve the ability to operate normally. So the drone swarm problem is not really that a cheap drone is stronger than a fighter. It is that cheap drones can push air power into a different kind of contest entirely. A contest over resilience, over rhythm, and over whether the most advanced aircraft in the world can still function when the ground system beneath them is under constant pressure. And once you see that, the next question becomes unavoidable. If the fighter is only the visible part of the machine, then what does it actually take to defend the machine itself? That question sounds straightforward at first. If cheap drones are becoming this disruptive, then the answer should be simple. Detect them earlier, jam them, shoot them down, build better defenses, and move on. That is the theory. The real problem is that countering drone pressure is not one job. It is several jobs happening at the same time, often under bad conditions, often with imperfect information, and usually with very little room for error. First, you have to see the threat clearly enough to understand what it is. That sounds basic, but it is not. A small drone can fly low, come in among clutter, approach from awkward angles, or look like something that is not worth reacting to until it's too late. Then comes the harder part. You still have to decide whether it is the real threat, a decoy, or the thing meant to make you reveal something more valuable. That decision point is where the pressure really starts. If you light up the radar, you may expose a radar. If you jam too aggressively, you may interfere with friendly systems or civilian infrastructure nearby. If you fire an expensive interceptor, you may be spending serious money to stop something built from cheap commercial parts. If you wait too long, the drone may already be close enough to matter. So the defense problem is not just about firepower. It is about judgment. And judgment gets harder when the attacks come in layers. A defender may be dealing with a one-way attack drone, a decoy, electronic interference, and the possibility of something larger behind all of it. That is why the dream of a clean technical solution keeps running into reality. There is no single answer that solves all of this at once. Missiles work, but they can be too expensive. Guns work, but only within limits. Jamming works, until it does not. Lasers and high-power microwave systems are promising, especially against groups of drones, but they also come with real constraints. Weather matters. Line of sight matters. Coverage matters. Integration matters. Even the most advanced system still has to be in the right place at the right time, tied into the right sensors, with clear rules for what is allowed to hit and when. And then there is a part that sounds old-fashioned until you realize it is becoming essential again. Shelters, camouflage, decoys, dispersal, blast barriers, anti-drone nets, rapid runway repair. In a strange way, cheap drones are making Airpower more modern and more old school at the same time. The future may involve directed energy and AI-assisted detection, but also involves hiding better, hardening more, and accepting that not every threat should be answered with the most sophisticated tool available. That is what makes this such an awkward problem for advanced air forces. They are used to solving problems with precision, performance, and technical superiority. Drone pressure forces a different mindset. You still need advanced systems, but now you also need depth, redundancy, cheaper intercept options, and base designs that can absorb disruption without falling apart. In other words, defending the machine means redesigning the machine. And once you get to that point, the uncomfortable conclusion gets harder to avoid. This is no longer just about protecting aircraft. It is about whether the entire model of concentrated, high-value air power can still function the way it used to. Once you follow the logic all the way through, the conclusion gets pretty hard to avoid. The drone swarm problem is not really about drones replacing fighter jets. That framing is too simple and honestly a little misleading. Fighter jets still matter for speed, range, payload, air policing, strike missions, and control of airspace. None of that disappears because small drones are suddenly everywhere. What changes is the environment those fighters now have to operate inside. And that is where the real pressure sits. A cheap drone does not need to outperform a fighter to reshape the balance. It only needs to force the fighter into a more defensive, more expensive, and more fragile system than the one it was built around. A runway that needs more protection. A fuel network that needs more redundancy. A radar picture that has to be managed more carefully. A base layout that has to assume constant low-cost probing. More money spent not on generating power, but on preserving the ability to generate power at all. That is a major shift, because for decades, advanced air power was built on concentration. Put high-value aircraft, train crews, fuel, munitions, and support systems together in a place that can produce sorties efficiently. Then use that concentration to generate overwhelming combat power. Drone pressure does not destroy that model overnight. It just makes it harder to run, harder to protect, and harder to scale without paying a growing penalty. That penalty shows up everywhere. More defenses layered around the base. More decoys. More shelters. More dispersal. More crews watching for smaller threats. More interceptors reserved for things that should never have been allowed to become expensive problems in the first place. And over time, that starts to change behavior. Commanders become more cautious. Assets get spread out. Operations slow down. The Air Force still looks powerful from the outside, but more of its energy is going into survival. That is the cost trap. Not losing because the aircraft suddenly stopped being advanced. Losing because the system around the aircraft became too strained, too exposed, and too expensive to operate with the same freedom as before. And that is why this matters far beyond Ukraine or one dramatic attack deep inside Russia. Any military built around a small number of exquisite aircraft should be paying attention to this now. The United States, NATO air forces, China too, for that matter, because the lesson is broader than one war. The future air fight is not only about who is the best jet, it is about who can keep high-end aircraft useful inside a threat environment filled with cheap mass, repeated pressure, and constant attempts to force costly reactions. That means the next era of Airpower will belong to the side that can combine both worlds at once. High-end fighters, yes, but also cheaper intercept options, stronger base defense, better dispersal, more resilient logistics, more deception, faster repair, and unmanned systems that add mass instead of just prestige. So no, the fighter jet is not obsolete, but the comfortable version of Airpower built around it is under real pressure. And if that pressure keeps growing, the decisive question in the next air war may not be which side has the better aircraft. It may be which side can keep its aircraft functioning when everything around them is being quietly, repeatedly, and cheaply pushed toward failure.